Alright, welcome to this first episode of a brand new series. I've been thinking about doing this format for a long time, and finally we're here, we're doing this, and I'm excited to share this with you. My name is Al Hug, and this is Minta Foundry Breakdowns. So this series will focus on breaking down my music, mostly samples, and maybe in the future other people's music too. We're only going to listen in these breakdowns, no being distracted by looking at DAWs, looking at plugins or settings. It's all going to be about like training your ears to hear subtle differences, hearing the difference between a tape machine and a tape machine VST, for example, or hearing the differences between a spring reverb, a plate reverb, a room reverb, and all that kind of stuff, you know? So sit back, relax, and just listen. The sample I chose for today's episode is a sample that is very similar to the one I placed in the Heady One track, Parlez-vous anglais. A lot of people contact me about this sample, and I have like a full breakdown on YouTube about it. So we're not going to look at that today, but the one I chose for today is very similar. The reason why I chose it is because it might actually get released. I can't tell you which artist yet. It might come out. So when it does, you already know all about it. But when I found out that it's going to be released, I went back into the project and listened to the individual stems just to get an idea, because I kind of had forgotten about it. I want to jump right into it. So first of all, we're going to listen to the sample as it sounded when I sent it out. So the final version. I ran it through my UHER tape machine, my mono tape machine, to make it sound really, really old. So we're gonna listen to that first, and then we're gonna go like backwards and listen to the individual stems. So you can hear all the distortion and the compression from the tape. Also, it's in mono, so it really has like a vintage sound to it. Let's listen to the sample just before I sent it into the tape. So the final mix of the sample, but just before that last mastering step. So you can clearly hear the difference, right? One is a bit less compressed, a bit less distorted, and the other one is like sounds super old. So I think the difference is pretty obvious. The tape really adds a lot of character. I remember when I made it, I was like, am I exaggerating the tape? Am I pushing it too much? But then I was like, you know what? No, this is fine. Let's do it. So let's do a deep dive into the sample and listen to each individual track. The first one, this is what I started with, is a percussion loop from one of my percussion packs. So this is either Percussion Breaks Volume 1 or Percussion Breaks Volume 2. I'm not 100% sure. I would need to check, but this is a already fully mixed loop with claves and bongos in there. There's also a tiny bit of reverb, so I didn't really have to add any other processing on this. So I think the rhythm is pretty interesting in this. It has this kind of go and stop motion where you feel like the loop is accelerating and then slowing down. But overall, a pretty simple loop. So next up is the vibraphone. So let's look at the chords for a second. The chords are C minor, then G, but with a B in the bass, so with the third in the bass. Then we have F minor, then we have G minor, which shifts to a G major just before the turnaround. There's almost no processing on this vibraphone, just a little bit of API 560 EQ. If you've seen my YouTube videos, you know that this is one of my favorite EQs. It's Mario Luciano that recommended it to me. It's really great for cutting lows and boosting highs. That's what I use it for mostly. In section 4 of this sample, there is a change in the vibraphone. I play the exact same chords, but 1 octave higher. And then in section 5, I layer both of them. So you kind of have this build up, you know. The next element that I added is this guitar melody. So this melody was recorded with my Gibson guitar through my Vox AC30 amp. There's already spring reverb on it from the amp. What you can hear in the final version is a lot of plug-in processing on it. So we have some Fairchild compression, some UAD EMT 140 plate reverb. Then I add more Fairchild compression to really bring the dry and the wet signal together. Then we have some API 560 EQ just to cut out some of the lows and boost some of the highs. And in the end, I add one of my favorite UAD plugins. It's the UAD V76 preamp. So what we're going to do is I'm going to play you the audio dry and then add all this processing on top. So this is without the plugins. And now I'm adding the plugins. Now. So you can clearly hear how nice the EMT sounds. So later in the composition, just when the higher vibraphone enters, there's a second guitar that enters too. What I needed at this point is like a bass to bring it all together. So that's what I added next. So let's listen to the bass a bit more closely in solo. So what you can hear in the background is the playback. So what I did is I kept the speakers running at a very low volume while I recorded the bass through the guitar amp with a microphone. So that's why you can kind of hear the guitar in the background, which makes it sound like the bass player and the guitar player were in the same room recording at the same time, which wasn't the case, obviously, but it sounds like it. And this helps bring everything together, you know, when there's some guitar in the background on the bass, when there's some bass in the background on the vocals and so on, it's just going to add a more natural feel to the whole sample. Obviously, it's pretty subtle, but you know, it's all about the details in these types of samples. We're already getting to the last main element in this sample, which is the flute. Well, I should say flutes because it's actually two flutes layered. Let's listen to those in solo. So you can hear how it's two melodies playing at the same time. It's not in unison, it's actually like a harmonized melody. So let's listen to the first one, try to find out what the notes are. So that's B flat, A flat, G. And then F. The lower melody would be this. So that is G, F, E flat. And then D. So both together is this. Some people ask me, how do I come up with these like harmonized melodies? And there's many ways of doing it. Either you just do it by ear, but the easiest way basically is just to determine the scale that you're in, compose a melody in that scale, and then just play a third below, a third on top, a sixth on top, or a sixth below. And this will get you the best results. On this flute we have some API, EQ, some Fairchild compression, and then we have a plugin that I don't use often, but now that I see it in here, I'm kind of reminded that I need to use it more because it's a super dope plugin. It's the UAD Cooper Time Cube. If I remember correctly, this is an emulation from a hardware device that had a tube in there or attached to the device that was used to create reflections. And also on the group for those two flutes, I have a UAD EMT 140 reverb. What I like to do with these 140 reverbs is to have it not super wide. So I don't want to have 100% stereo. Then there's just two more tracks, actually three more tracks, but two of them is kind of like, you know, ear candy transition stuff. So I'll just play them for you right now. This is basically just the guitar melody resampled to a new track and then pitched up 12 half steps, so a whole octave. And I removed the warping so the melody is played faster. And there's another transition coming up right here. So this is the flute resampled to a new track and pitched up 7 half steps. So what happens when you pitch up something 7 half steps? In this case, the whole sample is in C minor. If we pitch something up 7 half steps, that's a fifth above. So we get to G minor. G minor and C minor are very, very similar. There's basically just one note that is different, which is the A flat in C minor, or it will be an A in G minor. So this is C minor. And this is G minor. But now when we play G minor with an A flat, we get Phrygian, and Phrygian is a really cool scale, so this works perfectly. The last track in here is a spring reverb track. So what I did is send the whole mix into a spring reverb, which was a spring reverb that I don't have anymore now, but it was called the Knaus Ekdal Moisturizer. And then I recorded the spring back into the computer and have it play as like a separate track in the sample, and it sounds like this. So this track is way in the background and makes the whole sample a lot more interesting. Let's compare how the sample sounds with and without the spring. So this is without. And now with. So, like I said earlier, all of this, like the whole mix, I would send it in to the U-Hair tape machine and then play it back into my computer. So we have this stereo mix that will end up as a mono mix and sound a lot more distorted because of the tape. So one last time, let's hear the difference between before the tape and after the tape. This is before. And this is after. I recorded this tape track back into my computer and then added some more API 560, cut out some frequencies here and there, just some resonances that were disturbing, and then I added some Ocean Way Studios on there just to give it a bit more space. And in the end, I add another Fairchild compressor on there, make it nice and thick, and then the sample was done. So I sent the sample to Elite and he flipped it into a beat on his Twitch channel, and apparently the sample got placed. So we're still waiting on like final confirmation, but you know, fingers crossed. I hope you will be able to hear this sample in a finished song. Thank you for listening. This was the first episode of this new series. Let's see where we go with this. This was definitely fun. I hope you learned something. And Minta Foundry Breakdowns, episode 1. See you soon.